Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to take a break from learning about the Beatitudes, and we are going to talk about fathers. So happy Father's Day to the fathers out there. So the first thing that I want to talk about is Father's Day is one of the few holidays where you'll see things like we say Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and then we follow it up with, and to the mothers that are being fathers too. And let's just be clear, it is absolutely offensive to say such a thing. So there is no amount of love from a mother that's going to replace the love of a father. There's just not. So to celebrate one person, we shouldn't have to minimize another person. There's just no reason for it. So regardless, if you're someone that has grown up without a father in your life, it absolutely leaves a void within you that nobody can fill, no amount of anybody except the Lord. So that's about it. That's the only person that can step in and fill that void. And it is just one of those holidays where you see that like over and over and over. We want to almost discredit the role that fathers play in society and that men play in society, because sometimes we as women feel like we need just a little more credit. We need just a little more acknowledgement. But that's not what it's meant to be. So again, I think this is such an important thing to say. To celebrate the significance of one person, we should never have to minimize the significance of another person. So one really cool fact about fathers, and I'm going to say this every Father's Day that I teach forevermore, is that if a man goes to church, 93% of the time, his family will follow him. That's his wife, that's his children, 93% of the time. What an amazing opportunity to bring your family to the Lord. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're a woman and you're a mother and you're going to church and your husband isn't going with you, only 17% of the time will the family follow. So statistically, men have such an awesome opportunity where they can bring their whole family to the Lord. Because if you go, they're going to go. I don't know what could be more convicting in the Lord than knowing that when you make that decision to serve the Lord, that there's only a 7% chance that your family's not going to come with you. I mean, a lot of times in life we'll say, hey, it's a 50-50 chance. It could go either way. It's either going to go like this or go like that. Okay, well, your margin of error is 7%. That's pretty good. So today we're going to go to Deuteronomy 6 through 9. So this is the second year that I've looked for verses that really remind me of what does it mean to be a father? What are fathers responsible for? And even last night as I was sitting down and looking up different verses, I just kept coming back to this one right here. And here's what it says. It says, "And these words, which I command you today, shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. And you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." So these are the laws that we're talking about here, the commandments, talking about how important is it to talk about the words of God with our children. So the first part, in verse 6, it says, "These words I command you today shall be in your heart." So this is maybe the most important verse of the ones that I just read. So if these verses aren't in your heart, you're not going to be able to transfer them to the hearts of your children. So if we don't have that relationship with Christ, we're not going to be able to bring our children to Christ. We're not going to be able to show them what the walking looks like. So it's a great responsibility that you have as fathers to have that relationship with Christ and to bring your children to Christ. You know, as fathers, you're called to help nurture your wife's relationship with Christ. You're to help her spiritually along whatever path she's walking. You're to bring your children as well. So as a father, there is just so much responsibility that rests upon your shoulders. Even if you are not ready for that responsibility, the fact remains that it's still there. So if you choose to let your wife make those decisions, that's all well and good, but the Lord still will hold you accountable for the decisions that are made. So it's kind of important to recognize that and be aware that you can let other people make decisions for your household as a man. That's okay. But whatever those decisions are, even if you didn't make them, you are ultimately responsible for those decisions that are made. So it's really important when we think about the role of men in society. So first we have to have the words written on our heart. Then it says, you shall teach them diligently to your children and talk about them when you sit in the house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. So when you think about this, that's pretty much you are talking about the Lord all the time. He is in everything. The other day on Wednesday night Bible study, we were talking about, what does the life of a Christian look like? And one of the things that we talked about is how God becomes intertwined in everything in your life. There's no conversation that doesn't somehow bring itself back to Christ, doesn't bring itself back to something, some principle in the Bible where you go, you know what, hold on, I've got an answer to that problem because we have talked about it before in the Bible, and there's an answer in the Bible. So in order to teach it, we have to have it on our own hearts first. So this should be in everything we do. The first thing that we should lead our children to is to Christ. That's step one. You got to lead them there first so that they can have that strong relationship too. And then the next thing is you can't stop talking about it. You can't stop bringing them back to it. Because when you stop, you can't stop going back to it. That's the other thing. As parents, we can't stop going back to it, because if they see us stop going back to Christ and going to the Lord with our problems, they're going to be like, well, what's the point? Why would I go there? If you're not doing it, why would I do it? One of the most influential things that I've ever heard about parenting is that children don't do what you say, they do what you do. So you can have the best words possible. You can say the best things and have great advice. But if you aren't following it, then it's pretty much useless. What are you going to do with that advice if you aren't following your own advice? If you don't see the value in going to the Lord, why in the world would they? And then it says, you shall bind them as a sign on your hand. It just needs to be such an integral part of your life that people don't question, these are the important things to you. Like, these are the things that have meaning to you. I mean, in these couple of lines, you can just really see this sense of urgency and importance. You're being told to pretty much have them be part of your conversation, part of everything you do every day that you do it. So it gives you a real opportunity to share your love of God with your children. I mean, what we say to our children is going to have an effect much longer than we will ever really be able to understand. Like, we can say something to a child when they're 5, and you never realize how long that child holds on to that. So if you lead your young children to the Lord, it is kind of interesting to watch a small child's relationship develop with the Lord. Like even in watching Jocelyn, she's going to be 5 in July. Just hearing her relationship with the Lord is just, it's such a joy. Like she finds such joy in the Lord. Like I've never seen a child narrate the scenery with such joy and excitement. Those are God's cows. Those are God's trees. They're his birds, and he made this and he made that. And it's every blessed day. Every day that we're in the car, she points out God's creatures, and he made them, and he made you special too. And you're like, I hope you never lose that love of the Lord that comes to you in such a simple, joyous way. Like I don't remember too much about being that young. I mean, I know I always believed in God, but I don't remember having that like inner joy that she has to the Lord. And, I hope that's something that she never loses. It's just amazing to watch. Right. So I think that is, the number one thing when it says to train up a child in the way they should go. Pretty amazing to watch the things that the Lord has made, like each day. The other day I was looking at Hattie, and Hattie's 2.5, and it doesn't feel like she should be 2.5. My older son, Dominic, just turned 14, and definitely doesn't feel like that should have happened. And you look and you're like, what do you mean? How did we get from point A to point B so quickly? And, when you think about the wonders of the Lord, I often wonder, how interesting is it that we look at our children go from being babies, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like all before your eyes, but it's not. You go to bed and they're one size. You wake up in the morning, they're another size. And it's just so interesting. Like, to me, that's such a wonder of the Lord when you're like, how are you growing and I'm not seeing this, but it's happening? Like, how does that happen? Just like when you're a woman and you're pregnant. You don't see your stomach growing, and yet it's growing. And you're like, if that's not a wonder of the Lord, I don't know what is. So the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to go to Luke 15, and we're going to talk about the parable of the lost son. So this is the story of a relationship between a father and his son, and I think it really fits in with Father's Day. So I'm just going to read down through here. I'm going to start in Luke 15:11, the parable of the lost son. Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. So I just want to stop there for a second. So the son has asked his father for his portion, so for the things that belong to him, his inheritance, so to speak. So he goes and he takes them, and he wastes everything. So he uses everything that he has, which, this is an easy thing to do. It's easy to look at the amount of money in your bank account and frivolously spend it all with no regard to the future. How easy is that? It takes me basically one trip to Target where I could actually visualize that in my mind. But he gives him his whole portion, and, you're going to live on it for the rest of your life. It's not like your portion, then you come back. No, that's not how this works. So he gives him what he has, and so he spends it all. So now, this very last line, he is feeding the pigs, and he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. So he would be happy to sit and eat with the pigs at this point because he has nothing. So he went from having everything up here that was given to him to he would eat with the pigs, but no one will even allow him to do that. In verse 17 it says, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'" So here he takes this moment of reflection and goes, you know what? How many of his father's servants have food to eat? Surely he could ask for forgiveness and just maybe he'll just be his father's servant. He'll just work for his father, because then he won't have to worry about getting his basic needs met. But it's important to note that in verse 18, he knows that he has sinned against heaven. He knows that he needs forgiveness. So that's the very first thing. He knows that this was not what he was supposed to do with his inheritance. You just can't blow all your money and then expect there to be more. That's not how it works. So in verse 20, "And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight am no longer worthy to be called your son." So here he is. His father actually sees him in the distance. I love this. I feel like this is the foresight of a father. As fathers, you often know when your children are walking down a path that's leading to destruction. You know, and you can see it for miles to come. But also, you can see that first step that they make toward making their life right. So he sees him in the distance and he's watching. So you also get the implication that fathers are always watching. He hasn't stopped watching his son. Verse 22, it says, "But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to be merry. So his son has come back and is asking for forgiveness. He realizes the mistake he has made. And he's just happy to even get the opportunity to be a servant to his father, because that obviously sounds a lot better than the life that he's currently living, where he's thinking, you know what, if I could even eat with these animals or get a little bit of their food, then maybe I wouldn't go hungry. So back in verse 20, it says, "But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion." So how easy is it when you see your kids on a path that you know isn't right, and you know it's not leading anywhere they really want to go, to just be like, I told you that would work out that way. I told you that was going to be the path, that there would be a fire and you would in fact be consumed in the fire. It is easy to be like, hey, I want you to pat me on the back and tell me I was right. Let me know that I told you the right thing and you chose the wrong thing. Like, I think as people, it's easy to want that recognition. But here he is, and he's like, I know what you did, and I heard your prayer, but I'm going to meet you right here with compassion. And we're going to celebrate because you're alive again. So he asked for forgiveness for the sins that he committed. And he also, it says, he was lost and is found. He was dead and is alive again. So you just think of like what a beautiful reunion this must have been between a father and a son, to see that even after you went and spent your inheritance, you went and pretty much had a joyride of fun, and now you're back just wanting anything. You're wanting the scraps from the very table, and your dad is bringing out your best robe, a ring for your hand, and sandals for your feet. So what a beautiful moment of compassion. How beautiful that he could see that his son had had a heart change. So this really goes back to the other verse. If we have the word on our heart, we're going to be able to meet our children with a lot more compassion than if we don't have the word tucked away in our heart. Because we're going to see these biblical examples of compassion, of forgiveness, of being able to meet somebody where they are and celebrate those small steps of success so that they lead to bigger steps of success. Because if we continue to just tell someone, no, you're never going to make it, no, you're never going to be better, no, you're never going to be worth more than this one act you committed back in whenever, they won't. They won't be better than that because you have talked them right here and they can't get above this bar of right here. So they'll put themselves right there. So that's why our words have so much meaning to our children, to the people that we associate with, just to everybody. Our words are very powerful. And if we don't use them wisely, we could easily be discouragement instead of encouragement. So we have a lot on our plates as parents. And that's why it comes down to the love of a father. So as fathers, you have such an awesome opportunity. And of course, my favorite line about with a great opportunity is a great responsibility. They are always hand in hand. You will not get one without the other. So as fathers, you really create a relationship with how your children are going to look at the Lord. You draw the line of how will women be treated? What does it mean to be a man when you grow up? What do you value? Everything that is important to you, you are molding and shaping your children into who they're going to be. And most importantly, you are shaping what your children think of our Father in heaven. The relationship that you have with them, if it's loving and if it's compassionate and if it's forgiving, that is what they're going to think of their Father in heaven. So what an amazing opportunity. As women, we are more comforters and nurturers. But as men, you are doing such shaping and such molding that you create the very foundation of the relationship that your children are going to have with God. I can't imagine what could be more profound, important, more vital than knowing that you have that kind of power right there at your fingertips. And it starts when your children are born. The way that you treat that child will shape the way that they treat every single person, the way that they have a relationship with God, with their own mother, with their future wife, with their future children. It's such a high price on that relationship. And in society, we really have to take a step back and realize that fathers are every bit as important as mothers. Every bit as important as mothers. We cannot continue to minimize the importance of men and the importance of fathers in society, because the more we do that, we minimize the relationship with God the Father. So if we minimize those men that are right here in front of us, we minimize that man that we can't see, that you can't see the relationship that you have with. So we have to really reframe how we look at men in society. We have to show that they have value. We can't go, well, I'm a woman and I can do it better and I don't need you, and this long list. Listen, I'm an independent woman and I can do a lot of things, but I don't want to. I don't want to do all those things. I want a man that's going to take care of me. I want a man that's going to provide an example. I want a man that's going to be able to, embody these things to our children, to our family, because it's important. There's nothing like the way that a little boy looks up to their dad and the way that they want to be just like their dad. Whatever dad loves, they want to love it too. Men, look at your children. I bet that whatever you love, I bet one of your children loves it too. I bet your little boy loves it too, because he wants to be like you. That's exactly it. Like, how important are the men in our lives, and what are we doing, as women to show that those men matter, that they have value? Because we can't talk about how insignificant they are if we want them to be significant. I think, unfortunately, that no matter what, a mother can be the most loving mother, and she can be doing her very best to fulfill both roles, but it's just not a job we can fulfill. So what happens, their uncles, they look to them, they look at their cousins, they look at maybe grandpa, they look at all the men around them and go, who do I need to be like? That's not to say that if a woman is by herself, that she has not been given a struggle, especially if a man doesn't want to be involved. That is unfortunate, and that's not fair. It's very unfair. That's exactly when the men in the church need to step up. And that's why fathers need to know that, you know what? Yeah, there might be a single mother up there, but like, she needs somebody to step out and be like, hey, I could take your kids fishing. Hey, I could do this with your child. You know what? I see your little boy praying at the altar. I'm going to go up there with him, and I am going to lay my hands on him, and I am going to make him my responsibility. I am going to take him under my wing. That is what we're missing in our churches. That is what we're missing in our society. And I think that goes back to the very idea that little boys want to be just like their dad. So they want the approval of their dad. And no amount of approval from mom is the same as the approval from dad. Just like little girls. My little girl watches me get dressed and get ready for the day like her very life depends on it. Like, she watches with such sheer determination. Oh, why are we doing that? Oh, can I wear that perfume? Can I get a dress like you? Can I do this like you? And you're like, I had no idea that I was so important to anybody. Have a little girl. Little boys look at their dad. They go, what is dad like? What is important to my dad? And it's just not a role that either one can be replaced. Like, I could never replace a dad, and a dad could never replace me. Even if we weren't in the picture, I still can't fill that role because I'm not that role. I think in society we have learned that with so many things, we can substitute this for this. When we're making this, when we're doing that. Like, when I'm crafting or when I'm cooking, when I'm doing anything, I go, well, I don't really have that. So what can I use instead? And I think sometimes we transfer that into our life. And we go, well, I don't have this, so I'm just going to use this. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. We were just talking about the number of people incarcerated. So 85% of people incarcerated have no father figure. 85%. That's a lot of people. 85%. So again, as the man in the house, 93% of the time, your family is going to go with you to church. They're going to want to follow you and go where you go. And I don't know what could be more convicting than knowing that, than knowing you have such a vital and important role in your home. And nobody else is going to be able to have the same impact as you have. If I had that kind of impact, I would get up and I would go to church. I would bring my house to church. 93%. I've only got a 7% chance of failure. I make decisions every day, and I don't think I have a 7% chance of failure with most of them. So again, this is your call out. If you're a man in your house, take your family to church. There is no greater gift that you could ever give them than taking them to Jesus Christ and having a relationship with him.